I had to fake being poor to teach my daughter a lesson. I got more than I bargained for. My world was one of polished marble and silent, efficient staff. As Vivienne, founder of the Sterling Realty Group, my life was a monument to my own hustle, but my empire felt hollow. My daughter, Cassandra, was the jewel in this gilded cage, but a jewel that had lost its luster. At 26, her only ambition was to curate her Instagram. Her husband, Dominic, was a handsome accessory, a man whose smile never reached his eyes. That night I watched them from across our sprawling penthouse, their laughter sharp and empty. They were guests in the museum of my success, and I was the lonely curator. I clutched a photo of Cassandra as a child, her eyes bright with wonder, not avarice. A deep, sorrowful ache settled in my chest. The cage wasn't just for her, it was for me, and the key was a truth I was too afraid to face. It was Cassandra's birthday. I arranged everything, the string quartet, the ice sculptures, the champagne fountain, but her face was a thundercloud. "You got the Aventador in white," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that cut through the music. "I specifically said matte black, it's like you don't even listen." The guests fell silent. I reached for her arm. "Darling, we can have it wrapped." She jerked away. "Don't touch me, you're so useless. If Dad were alive, he'd know what I want. You're just a lonely old woman trying to buy my love." The words hung in the air, a public execution. The crystal glass in my hand felt like a lead weight. The cage door had just been blasted open, and I was staring into an abyss. Alone in my study, the silence was deafening. Cassandra's words echoed, each one a fresh laceration. I looked at the portrait of my late husband, Charles. "I've failed her, my love," I whispered. I hadn't just given her wealth, I had built her a prison of dependency. Throwing money at the problem had created it. A radical, terrifying idea began to form, a crucible. To save her, I had to destroy the world she knew. I needed to show her the value of things that couldn't be purchased. I called Arthur, my lawyer and oldest friend. His voice was grim. "Vivienne, are you sure? This is playing with fire." My reply was steel. "It's the only way. We're burning it down, Arthur, all of it." The plan was set in motion with military precision. Arthur leaked a story to the financial press. Sterling Realty implodes, catastrophic bet on foreign markets. Fake documents, a panicked board, a forced liquidation. We sold the penthouse, the cars, the vacation homes. To the world, Vivienne Sterling was a cautionary tale. I transferred my real fortune into a blind trust, a ghost only Arthur and I could see. The final act was telling Cassandra and Dominic. I practiced my lines, the performance of a lifetime. I had to be convincing. This wasn't just a lesson anymore, it was a test of their very souls. I was about to bet everything on a hope I didn't truly feel. I gathered them in the nearly empty penthouse, moving boxes surrounding us. "There's been a disaster," I began, my voice trembling with feigned shame. "A bad investment, I've lost everything, we've lost everything." The silence that followed was more profound than any scream. Dominic's face went from bored to calculating in a nanosecond. Cassandra's was pure, unadulterated horror. "What do you mean, everything?" she whispered. I handed them 2 bus tickets. "There's a small apartment in Oakwood Creek, it's all I could manage." The explosion was nuclear. "You stupid, stupid woman," Cassandra shrieked. "You've ruined my life." Dominic just stared, his eyes cold. The test had begun and they were already failing. Oakwood Creek was a world of chipped paint and the distant sound of traffic. Our new home was a cramped 2-bedroom apartment that smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. The linoleum was cracked, the faucet dripped and the walls were thin. Cassandra stood in the middle of the living room, frozen in disgust. Dominic threw his bag on the worn sofa. "Unbelievable," he muttered. I adopted a posture of defeated submission, my shoulders perpetually slumped. "I'm so sorry," I mumbled, watching them. There were no tears of sympathy, no words of encouragement, just a bitter, resentful silence. The first seed of doubt was planted in my mind. What if there was nothing left to save? I got a job as a sales clerk at a local department store. The humiliation was a public spectacle, the mighty Vivienne Sterling folding cheap sweaters. Cassandra and Dominic did nothing. They slept until noon, expecting me to cook and clean after my shifts. "Mother, this floor is sticky," Cassandra complained, as if I were hired help. Dominic would borrow the little cash I earned for job-hunting expenses, which I soon realized was code for beer. The psychological manipulation began subtly. "You really did a number on us, Vivienne," Dominic would say, shaking his head. "At your age, starting over, it's pathetic." I documented every insult, every entitled demand in a hidden digital journal. A month in, the charade was taking its toll. My feet ached, my spirit felt frayed. But it was the nighttime whispers that truly chilled me. I'd lie awake hearing their muffled arguments through the paper-thin wall. "We can't live like this," Cassandra would hiss. "We need to think of a way out," Dominic would reply, his voice low and urgent. One night the word lawyer drifted through the wall. My breath hitched. Were they finally going to step up, find a real solution? A naive part of my heart clung to that hope. The mother in me wanted to be proven wrong. The strategist in me knew better. The whispers grew more specific. Power of attorney, clearly not in her right mind. The stress has broken her. I felt a cold dread that had nothing to do with our financial situation. They weren't planning an escape, they were planning a coup. One evening I pretended to have a fainting spell, a test of their humanity. Cassandra's reaction was not fear but annoyance. "Can't you just be careful?" she snapped. Later I heard her on the phone. "Yes, Dr. Evans, my mother's instability is worsening. We're very concerned. When can we schedule the evaluation?" The last vestige of hope within me withered and died. The lesson was over. The war had begun. The grieving mother was gone. In her place stood the CEO who had clawed her way to the top. Their plot was my battlefield. I became a ghost, gathering my arsenal. I bought a tiny, high-quality voice recorder. I started leaving my old, seemingly broken phone in the room, its camera app secretly active. I played my part to perfection, sprinkling in moments of confusion, misplacing keys, forgetting a simple name to feed their narrative. I was the vulnerable prey, and they were the arrogant predators, unaware the trap was theirs. Arthur was my only confidant. "It's worse than we thought, Arthur. They're not just spoiled, they're malignant." Dominic grew bolder. He brought home paperwork disguised as insurance forms. "Just sign here, Vivienne, it's to protect you." I squinted at them, playing frail. "It's all so complicated, Dominic, can you explain it?" His smile was patronizing. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about it." I signed with a shaky hand, a fake signature I'd practiced. He never noticed. I recorded it all. His condescending tone, his pressure, his glee at my supposed weakness. Meanwhile, Cassandra's cruelty became more overt. "No one will hire me with this address on my resume. You've tainted us," she spat one night. I simply nodded, storing her venom for the final reckoning. Arthur's private investigator delivered the final, damning evidence. Dominic was not just in debt. He was being investigated for fraud at his last company. The Dr. Evans he and Cassandra were consulting had a history of losing his license for unethical practices, only to have it reinstated on a technicality. They weren't just trying to control my money, they were trying to bury me. The date was set. The competency evaluation was in 1 week. I looked at my reflection in the smudged bathroom mirror. The woman staring back was tired, but her eyes held a fire I hadn't seen in years. It was time to stop gathering evidence and start building the gallows. The week before the evaluation was a masterclass in psychological warfare. I leaned into my role, becoming increasingly forgetful and dependent. I asked Cassandra how to use the microwave. I wept over a broken plate. They ate it up, their confidence growing with my perceived fragility. They spoke freely in front of me, as if I were a piece of furniture. I learned the details of their plan. After the doctor's declaration, they would immediately petition for conservatorship, seize control of my remaining assets, and put me in a home. Their words recorded in crystal-clear audio. I smiled to myself. The stage was set. The day arrived. The small apartment was crowded and tense. Dr. Evans, a man with a weak handshake and shifty eyes, sat with a notepad. Cassandra and Dominic's lawyer, a slick young man named Mr. Reed, hovered by the door. I sat in my worn armchair, the picture of bewildered vulnerability. Cassandra wore a mask of concerned devotion. "We just want what's best for you, Mother," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Dominic stood behind her, the picture of supportive solemnity. I clutched a tissue in my lap, my heart pounding not with fear but with anticipation. The show was about to begin. "Mr. Reed began, his voice slick and rehearsed. "Given Mrs. Sterling's recent erratic behavior, financial recklessness, and clear cognitive decline, my clients have no choice but to petition for guardianship. Dr. Evans' evaluation will confirm her inability to manage her own affairs." He presented a folder. "We have statements detailing her confusion, her instability." Cassandra nodded, adding a tear for effect. "It's so hard to see her like this." I remained silent, my head bowed. Let them lay out their entire case. Let them feel the thrill of imminent victory. It would make the fall so much more satisfying. Just as Mr. Reed reached the climax of his speech, there was a firm, authoritative knock on the door. Everyone froze. Dominic frowned. "Who's that?" I looked up, a slow, deliberate smile spreading across my face for the first time. That would be my lawyer. Arthur entered, followed by a court reporter and a large, calm man from a private security firm. The energy in the room shifted violently. Arthur's presence was a shockwave. "Please continue," he said, his voice cool. "I believe you were discussing my client's mental state." I stood up. The transformation was instantaneous. The stoop vanished from my shoulders, the confusion fled from my eyes. I was Vivienne Sterling, CEO once again. "Thank you for the performance," I said, my voice ringing with authority. The look on Cassandra's face was priceless, a mixture of shock, terror, and dawning comprehension. Dominic took a step back, his face pale. "What is this?" he stammered. I looked at him, then at my daughter. "This is the final lesson, the one you taught me." I nodded to Arthur. He connected his laptop to a small portable projector, casting the evidence onto the bare wall. First, the audio. Their voices filled the room, the insults, the conspiracies, the cold-hearted plot to have me declared insane. Cassandra's face crumpled in shame. Dominic's hardened in fury. Then the financials. Arthur displayed the true state of my empire, stronger than ever. "The poverty was a test," I stated. "One you failed in the most spectacular, monstrous way possible." I revealed the fake signature, the corrupt doctor, Dominic's fraud investigation. I turned my full gaze to Cassandra. "I wanted to teach you the value of the little things, kindness, integrity, family. Instead, I learned the depth of your betrayal. You weren't just a spoiled child, you were a willing accomplice to my destruction." My voice broke, not with weakness, but with raw, final grief. "You are no daughter of mine." I then addressed Dominic. "You thought you were a predator, but you were just a parasite, and your host is cutting you off." Arthur served them with the documents, restraining orders, a lawsuit for conspiracy and intentional infliction of emotional distress. "The apartment," I announced, "is owned by my trust. I am donating it, effective immediately, to a local shelter for abused women. In your names, consider it your one and only charitable contribution." The security guard stepped forward. "You have 10 minutes to pack your personal belongings and leave the premises." The looks on their faces, the utter, total defeat, was a hollow victory, but a victory nonetheless. They had been outplayed at their own game. The silence after they left was profound. The apartment was a crime scene, and I was the sole survivor. There was no joy, only a vast, echoing emptiness. I had won. I had exposed them and protected myself, but I had also lost my only child. I sat in the quiet, the weight of my choices pressing down on me. Arthur placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did what you had to, Vivienne." I knew he was right, but the knowledge was a cold comfort. The mother in me was in mourning. I could not return to my old life. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum. Instead, I channeled everything into the Sterling Foundation, dedicated to supporting elderly victims of financial exploitation by family members. My pain became my purpose. I used my story, anonymized, to raise awareness and funds. I found a new strength, not in my wealth, but in my resilience. The little things I had wanted to teach Cassandra, purpose, connection, self-worth, were the very things I reclaimed for myself. A year later, I was giving a talk at a community center funded by my foundation. As I spoke about resilience, I saw her, Cassandra. She was sitting in the back, dressed in simple, worn clothes. Her face was thinner, her eyes held a sadness that wasn't there before. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. There was no anger, no plea, just a quiet acknowledgement. She stood and slipped out before I finished. She was a ghost, a living reminder of a life that was no longer mine. The encounter was unsettling, but it didn't break me. I moved into a bright, comfortable loft, a home I chose for its light and its view of the city, not its status. I surrounded myself with a small, trusted circle of friends. My work at the foundation was deeply fulfilling. I had learned the hardest lesson of all, that family is not a title but a choice, and I had chosen to free myself from a toxic one. My wealth was no longer just a number in a bank account. It was my peace, my purpose, and my hard-won freedom. I stood on my balcony, the city lights twinkling like a field of diamonds I had no desire to own. The chapters of manipulation and betrayal were closed. The story of Vivienne, the desperate mother, was over. I was no longer defined by my relationship to a daughter, but by my strength as a woman. I had loved, I had lost, I had been broken, and I had rebuilt myself from the foundation up. The revenge was complete, but the true victory was my peace. I took a deep breath of the cool night air, turned my back on the darkness of the past, and walked inside, finally, unshakably whole.